to try to define whether we're talking about something I'm doing, something Congress is doing, or something the President's doing. Because I can't speak for Congress as a whole. See, what a lot of people, they'll come to us sometime and they'll say, why don't you change A, B, C, and D as a Congress? No member of Congress can do that. I can't even get a piece of legislation brought on the floor unless the Speaker of the House authorizes that piece of legislation to come. The House is different than the General Assembly. Sam will tell you, the General Assembly, if Sam files a piece of legislation, it has to come up for a vote. Now, they may vote it down, but it has to come up for a vote. In Congress, if I file a bill in Congress, unless the chairman of that committee wants it to come up, it's never coming up. Even if a majority of people in that committee want it to come up. That's why it's so crucial in who you have as the leadership in the House and in the Senate, because they control the pipeline of where legislation comes. The second thing we have is these bills don't just address one purpose, which I think they should, but they don't. They address a multitude of purposes. So Darren, let me give you a good example. Years ago, I went out to meet with some of our pilots on aircraft carrier. And I went in and I said, look, I'm here from the Armed Services Committee. I don't want press in here. I don't want your admirals in here. I just want to come in and meet with you guys. And we shut the doors and went back, and I said, tell me what you need. And this was back in like 2001. I said, tell me what you need. They didn't tell me retirement plans. They didn't tell me more pay. You know what they said they needed? Engines for their planes. They said, we don't have enough parts for our planes. We're having to literally rob parts from this plane, put on this plane, and it's creating a dangerous situation for us. Can you guys get us more engines? So we came back, a couple of us that went out, and we worked literally all night long to get those engines in a bill that we could fight for the parts that our pilots needed out of those aircraft carriers. When the bill came back from the Senate, that bill had put in it all kinds of stuff. I remember one of the things that it had in there was some kind of road in West Virginia that Senator Byrd had put in there. Well, that was distasteful to me. That, I'm sitting here, we're fighting for parts for our pilots who are defending the country, but all of a sudden I've got this bill that's going to have a road in West Virginia, and I've got this choice. Do I simply vote no and don't get those engines to those pilots, or do I vote for this bill that contains the engines, but also contains a provision in there that I think is horrendous and bad? And I voted to get the engines to those pilots because they needed to have them. One of the things we have supported is a piece of legislation that would say on each bill that comes out there, you would have to list where in the Constitution it gives you the authority to have that particular provision in the bill. The other thing that I would love to see is if we could get to a situation like the General Assembly does in many of their bills, where you have a single purpose for each bill instead of these enormous bills. I'll tell you one that's coming out, and I'll probably vote against this bill. The Armed Services Authorization Bill, which is partly my bill. I mean, I'm on the Armed Services. We wrote it. It was a good bill. It went over in the Senate. The Senate is tagged on the hate crimes legislation on there to an Armed Services bill. So that means members of Congress are going to be confronted with voting against funding the military because they hate what that hate crimes bill does. So what I can tell you as one person is we need to fight for legislation that helps to limit that scope. But the biggest thing I think we need to do is try to change the leadership to get people on chairmanships of committees and a Speaker of the House who's going to say, Michael, let us have this. Yeah, state of